present. Are both sides ready to start?
Can we just have a brief sidebar, please?
Sure. Okay, is there anything else before we start this morning?
Judge,
I'm sorry, hold on just one second.
when you get a chance, Judge, if you could get us a calendar for September and October, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thanks.
I guess I haven't done that because everything's sort of moving quickly and things are up in the air. If there's particular days that you all have asked to have off or you're not available and you've told me about it, just assume those days are going to be off.
Okay.
I just was, I don't know what I was waiting for, just to sort of see how things go this week and then ask the state about where we are.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if we were going faster than planned or as planned. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jurors are entering.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone else may be seated. The jurors are all present. State when you're ready, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Michael Morrison, please.
Good morning, sir. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, sir. You can put your hand down and be seated. Please lean into the microphone so we can hear you and state your full name and spell your last name.
Michael Morrison, Morrison.
Good morning, Mr. Morrison. How are you?
Good morning, sir.
How are you employed, sir?
I'm sorry?
How are you employed? Are you working?
Yes, sir.
What do you do?
I am a paving crew leader for the city of Tamarack.
Okay. I'd like to call your attention to February the 11th, 2017. How were you employed on that date?
I owned a business, Sunrise Tactical Supply.
Okay. And how long had you owned Sunrise Tactical Supply?
I believe we opened in 2013.
Okay. And what type of things would you sell at Sunrise Tactical Supply?
We were a licensed firearms dealer, ammunition, holsters. We did classes, concealed weapons classes. It related to the trade.
Okay. And you started the business in 2013?
Correct.
Okay. When you sell a firearm, what is the procedure that's used?
Procedure is the customer who wants to purchase needs to fill out a Form 4473. Once that's completed, a background check is then submitted. The information from that form is submitted to the state, and upon an approved control number coming back from the state, the firearm is either released the same day to a person with a concealed weapons permit, or there is a 5 business day wait without the concealed weapons permit, which does not include weekends and holidays.
Okay. And where was Sunrise Tactical located?
7600 Wiles Road.
Okay. And a 4473, that's a federal form?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And were you the custodian of records of that form?
Yes, sir.
At Sunrise Tactical? Okay, Mr. Morrison, I want to show you now State's Exhibit Mark 19V for identification, sir. And if you would look at that and see if you recognize it.
This is Mr. Cruz's 4473.
Okay. And were you present when it was filled out?
Yes, I was, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to offer State's Exhibit 19B, and I showed it to Mr. Wheeler.
Is there any objection?
No, ma'am.
States Exhibit 19B, like Victor, will be received as States 335. $355, 355, excuse me, thank you. 355.
Can you see this okay, Mr. Morrison?
Yes, sir.
On your screen? So, and you were present for this sale, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so how was this form completed? Could you run through with us how it's done?
Person comes in, picks out their selection. Once the selection is made, the customer is given a 4473 to fill out.
Okay,
It's to have their name, their current address. Then there's several questions that have to be answered. Once they've completed their portion of it, it is signed stating that the information they provided is true and accurate.
okay. So in State's Exhibit 355, which is the 4437 form, the Nikolas Jacob Cruz, that's filled out by him, right? The purchaser, Nikolas Jacob Cruz, correct?
Yes, sir.
And he fills out the address and the
Yes, sir.
city and the county, right?
Yes, sir.
And place of birth, that's his writing,
Yes, sir.
correct? And he fills out the height, 5'7", weight, 128 pounds, right?
Correct?
Male, and his date of birth, right?
Yes, sir.
And someone who is going to purchase a weapon, in this case a rifle, have to be 18 or over, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then, Mr. Morrison, there's, let me see if I'm so bad at this. These questions here.
The wheel.
The wheel. All right, that's not too bad. So, are you the actual transferee buyer of the firearm listed on the form? If you're not the actual transfer buyer, you are acquiring the firearm on behalf of another person. If you are not the actual transferee buyer, the licensee cannot transfer the firearm to you. Exception if you are picking up a repaired firearm for another person and you are not required to answer 11A and may proceed to question 11B. See instructions for question 11A. Who fills out? Yes.
Yes.
He does, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you under indictment or information in any court for a felony or any other crimes for which the judge could imprison you for more than 1 year? See instructions for question 11B. The check mark, no, he does that.
Correct.
Right? Okay. Have you ever been convicted of a felony, convicted in any court of a felony or any other crime for which the judge could have you imprisoned you for more than 1 year, even if you received a shorter sentence, including probation? See instructions for question 11C. He writes no, correct?
Correct.
And that's his check mark, correct?
Yes, sir.
Are you a fugitive from justice? See instructions for question 11D. He writes no, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Are you an unlawful user of or addicted to marijuana or any depressant, stimulant, narcotic drug, or any other controlled substance? Warning. The use or possession of marijuana remains unlawful under federal law, regardless of whether it has been legalized or decriminalized for medicinal or recreational purposes in the state where you reside. And he
Check
checks
no.
no, correct?
Yes,
That's
sir.
his check mark? Okay. Have you ever been adjudicated as a mental defective, or have you ever been committed to a mental institution? See instruction for question 11F. He checks no, correct?
Correct.
That's his check mark. Okay. Have you ever been discharged from the armed forces under dishonorable conditions? His check mark, no, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you subject to a court order restraining you from harassing, stalking, or threatening your child or an intimate partner or a child of such partner? See instructions for question 11H. He check marks no, correct? That's his check mark?
Correct,
Okay.
sir.
Have you ever been convicted in any court of a misdemeanor crime or domestic violence? See instructions for question 11I. That's his check mark, right?
Correct, no.
12, country of citizenship, United States of America, that's his check mark, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then 12B, have you ever renounced your United States citizenship? His check mark, no, correct, Mr. Morrison?
Correct.
Okay. Are you an alien illegally or unlawfully in the United States? Check mark, his check mark, no, correct?
Correct.
All right. Are you an alien who has been admitted to the United States under a non-immigrant visa? And he's checked no, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then if yes, you fall within any of the exceptions stated in the instructions, and he puts a check mark under NA, not applicable, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that's the first page, correct?
Yes, sir. Correct.
Okay. And he fills that out himself.
Yes.
Okay. And then the second page. That's his signature right there, and the date, 2/11/2017. Can you see that? Or see the top line? Number 14, transferee, buyer signature?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. And the date, the certification date, that's the date that he comes in to make the purchase?
Yes, sir.
So February the 11th, 2017, correct?
Correct.
And then it says type of firearm, long gun. Who makes that check?
That is made by the employee of the store, the clerk.
Okay. And when you were working that day, did you have an employee working with you?
Yes, sir.
And what's that person's name?
David Martinez.
Okay. And line 13, identification. Is that Mr. Martinez's handwriting?
Yes, sir.
And then number or identification, what's that?
That is the license, that's the number on the driver's license or ID from the state.
Okay. And the expiration date, 9/24/205, right?
Correct.
So you check identification, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And in that, your form, you have this identification, right?
Yes, sir.
And that is a Florida identification card, right?
Yes, sir.
Nikolas Jacob Cruz, his address in Parkland, and that date of birth, and that matches what he had put on the 4473 form, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you demand identification, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the third page, what's this?
The signature line on the third page is what needs to be signed upon the release of the firearm.
Okay. And the description at 24, the manufacturer, importer, S&W, what's that stand for?
Smith & Wesson
And M&P Sport 2,
is the model of the rifle.
TF 16214,
Serial number.
okay. And type rifle.
Yes, sir.
And then the caliber 5.56-223, what's that mean?
Yes, sir. That's the caliber that the rifle is rated to shoot.
Okay. And of course it has Sunrise Tactical and your address on there, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you recognize Mr. Martinez's signature?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so this, the transfer was 2/18 of 2017, right?
Yes, sir.
And that you explained to us before, the 5-day, has to be 5-day waiting period if you don't have a concealed weapons permit,
Correct, excluding weekends and holidays.
Okay. And part of this form is your sales slip. And do you recognize
Yes, sir.
that? Okay. You see when it says paid, whose handwriting that is?
That's mine.
Okay. And the price of the weapon was $618.74?
Correct.
Okay. So before, what's the procedure for when you meet someone who comes in to the store to buy a gun? What do you do? And what did you do in this case during the sale? Do you have any procedures you follow?
Every customer is engaged in conversation. We look for any red flags, any signs that why the sale should not happen. If for any reason anyone was uncomfortable with anything about the sale did not happen, period.
Okay. And did you engage that conversation with Nikolas Cruz?
I had a brief conversation, I believe, on pickup, as I stated in my deposition. I came out and asked him, what are you going to do with the rifle? And the reply was, I go shooting with my friends on the weekends. I just want my own stuff.
Okay. All right. Let me show you now State's Exhibit 270. And it's made safe, Mr. Morrison. So, do you recognize what this is?
That is the M&P Sport rifle.
Okay. And do you know where the serial number is?
It would be on probably the opposite side of the magazine well,
Okay.
or on the receiver by the trigger, right here on the bottom.
Okay. TF 16214, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is the rifle you sold Nikolas Cruz, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. When you sold this gun, were there any additions made? In other words,
No, sir, there was nothing on the rifle when it left the store.
Okay. So this weapon here has a bipod,
Yes, sir.
right? Right?
Correct.
Is that on the weapon?
No, sir.
Okay. And it has, well, why don't you tell us what else it has that wasn't sold with?
It did not have the bipod. It did not have the vert grip. The sight may have been in the box because there was no rear sight on it. It's a standard flat top receiver, and there was no sling.
Okay. All right. Mr. Morrison, thank you very much. Your Honor, I have no further questions of Mr. Morrison.
Mr. Dennis, do you have any questions?
Yes, ma'am. That's it.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
Mr. Morrison, good morning.
Morning.
You mentioned on direct that an 18-year-old could walk into the store and purchase a firearm. Is that accurate?
At that particular time, yes.
Is it accurate now?
No, sir.
What is it now?
It's 21.
Irrelevant.
Overruled.
You can answer the question, sir.
21.
You have to be 21 years old to purchase a firearm,
Yes, sir.
regardless if it's a small handgun or a high-velocity rifle.
Correct.
I'm not sure if you can see what I'm looking at here. You see that?
No, sir.
Is it working?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So who can't buy a firearm?
Pardon me?
Who can't buy a firearm?
Convicted felon.
Okay. Anyone else?
Person who is using marijuana medically. anyone domestic violence, there's a, when you do the background check, the information is submitted to the state. So the state determines that control number, whether it's an approval or not.
All right, and you mentioned there's an additional, I guess, hedge that the person would have to jump over. When they walk into your store, you would have this interaction with them, right?
Yes, sir.
The salesperson, according to the form here, was your employee David Martinez, is that correct?
Correct.
Would he be the person interacting with Mr. Cruz?
We both were. We both engaged. It was busy, and we both, at some point or another, engage with customers.
Okay.
So it's not uncommon for two of us to engage with one customer.
Well, you mentioned that you had this conversation with him upon pickup of the weapon. That's after the 5-day waiting period, right?
Correct.
So is it safe to assume that Mr. Martinez helped them in the initial selection of the firearm?
Yes.
Okay. And he would have that interaction, that initial interaction with them?
Yes, sir.
Judge, can I have a second?
Sure.
Nothing further. Thanks, Judge.
Okay, is there anything else, Dave?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. You're excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, can I put the weapon back?
Sure.
Can I call my next witness?
You may.
Dr. McDougall?
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You can put your hand down and be seated. And when you're seated, please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Rebecca MacDougall, MacDougal.
And doctor, what is your occupation?
I'm the Chief Medical Examiner at the Broward County Medical Examiner's Office.
And how long have you been the Chief Medical Examiner at the Broward County Medical Examiner's Office?
Since June of 2021.
Okay, and before that, could you describe your work history?
I can. Education as well.
Please.
Okay, I did my undergraduate at the University of Texas. I went to medical school at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston, Texas. I did a 4-year anatomic and clinical pathology residency at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. And I did a 1-year forensic pathology fellowship at the Broward County Medical Examiner's Office.
Okay, and how about your work experience?
After I completed my fellowship in June of 2011, I stayed on at Broward as an associate medical examiner.
Okay. You have any medical licenses?
I do.
Where?
In Texas, New Jersey, Mississippi, and Florida.
Okay. And are you on any boards? American Board of Pathology?
So I do have my boards in anatomic and forensic pathology.
Okay, all right. How many autopsies in your career, doctor, would you say that you have performed?
About 3,500.
Okay, and of those 3,500, could you give us an approximation how many times you were able to determine the cause of death?
3,500.
Okay, and of those 3,500, just again, an approximation if you can, how many of those autopsies were the cause of death was gunshot wounds?
Probably 1,000.
Okay. I'd like to call your, have you ever testified as an expert in forensic pathology?
I have
How many times?
over 100.
And in what courts?
Palm Beach County and Broward County.
Okay. I'd like to call your attention to Thursday, February the 15th, 2018. Were you working on that day?
I was.
Okay. And were you called upon to perform certain autopsies?
I was.
Okay. And did you perform an autopsy on a young man named Alex Schachter?
I did.
Okay. I'd like to show you now, ma'am, state exhibits 17T, 17S, 17R, 17Q, 17P, 17O, 17N, 17M, 17L, and I'm going to, this is already in. So with those exhibits, Dr. McDougall, do you recognize what those photographs are?
I do.
And were they taken during the course of your autopsy of Alex Schachter on Thursday, February the 15th, 2018?
They were.
Okay. And would they assist you in explaining to the court and to the jury the nature of Alex Schachter's wounds?
They would.
And would they assist you in describing the manner and cause of death?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to offer these exhibits.
Is there any objection?
I just need to review them quickly if I may.
Sure.
Sure.
Yep.
You want your chair below? Thank you.
May I first?
Sure. You may?
After the court reviews them, we could get a sidebar brief, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Sidebar brief.
Okay. Okay, over the defense objection states 17L as in Larry will be received as 356. 17M like Mary will be received as 357. 17N like Nancy 358. 17O 359. 17P 360. 17Q 361. 17R 362. 17S 363, and 17T, like Tom, 364.
Thank you, Anna. Dr. McDougall, while the clerk is marking the evidence, could you give us the age, height, and weight of Alex Schachter, please?
I can. He's 14 years old, 105 pounds, and 65 inches in length.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 200, is this Alex Schachter you performed the autopsy on?
Yes.
Oh. Thanks. Doctor, I want to show you now State's Exhibit marked 356. Can you see that okay?
I can.
Okay. You have one wound labeled A and one B. Could you describe, let's start with A, obviously. Could you describe that to us?
I can. So gunshot wound A is a penetrating gunshot wound to the right side of the chest. It injures the upper lobe of the right lung, and the spinal cord is transected. There's 600 milliliters of blood in the right side of the chest, and the 7th thoracic vertebrae is also fractured.
Okay. Would that wound A in and of itself be fatal?
Yes.
And would Mr. Alex Schachter be able to move, because you said it transected his spine?
Correct. It transects his spinal cord.
Okay.
At the level of the 7th thoracic vertebrae.
And what does that mean?
So he can't move from that level down.
Okay. And gunshot wound B?
So gunshot wound B is also a penetrating gunshot wound. It enters the left side of the chest. It injures skin, soft tissue, and muscle.
Okay.
And there's a contusion on the upper lobe of the left lung.
Okay. Would wound B be fatal in and of itself?
Can be.
Okay. Based on the wound A and B, Dr. McDougall, would those two wounds be consistent with someone standing, or Alex Schachter standing?
Yes,
And why do you say that?
because they go from front to back and downward.
Okay. And I show you now State's Exhibit marked 357. And
So this is the projectile fragment that's recovered from the right side of the upper back.
okay, and that's as a result of which wound?
A.
Okay, and that's why you have the A there showing that that's the exit wound and,
That's correct.
okay. Showing you now State's Exhibit marked 358.
So this is a cluster of ballistic injuries on the upper left shoulder that I labeled C.
Okay. And obviously not fatal, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 359.
So so I can't see the letter. So D, E, and F are on the forearm.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. That's okay. So this is a cluster of ballistic injuries that I labeled E. These are on the forearm of the left upper extremity.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 360.
This is another picture of the ballistic injuries to include the injury on his hand.
And State's Exhibit 3.
Can we have a brief sidebar, please? Sure, thank you.
Okay, Doctor. I'm going to show you now State's Exhibit marked 362.
These are fragments of projectiles that were collected from the left upper extremity, so from those ballistic injuries.
Okay. And State's Exhibit marked 363.
This is a jacket fragment that was recovered from the left chest.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 364.
This is the projectile fragment that was recovered from the back.
And the cause of death of Alex Schachter.
It's multiple gunshot wounds.
Okay, Doctor. I'm going to show you now State's Exhibits 18G, 18F, 18E, 18O, or I guess it's D, 18C, 18B, 18A, and 17Z. Can I ask you, Doctor, can you identify these exhibits?
Yes.
Okay. And what are they?
Those are autopsy photographs that were taken during Alyssa Aldahaf's autopsy.
Okay. And you performed the autopsy on Alyssa Al-Hadef?
I did.
Okay. And would those exhibits that I read into the record assist you in explaining to the court and to the jury the nature of wounds that you discovered during the autopsy of Alyssa Al-Hadef?
They will.
And would they also help you in explaining the cause of death of Alyssa Al-Hadef?
They will. They will.
Your Honor, I'd like to offer these exhibits now. I'll show them to Mr. Cruz.
Okay.
approach?
You may. Thank you. Okay, is there any objection to the introduction of 17Z as well as 18A through G for identification regarding the autopsy of Alyssa Alhadeff?
It's no move for new and object pursuant to ground detail in DMIL 12.
Okay, thank you. Over the defense objection, states 17Z as in zebra for identification will be received as 365. 18A like alpha will be received as 366. 18B like Bravo will be received as 367. 18C like Charlie will be received as 368. 18D like Delta will be received as 369. 18E will be received as 370. 18F like Frank, 371. And 18G like George, 372.
Thank you, Honor.
Thank you.
Dr. McDougall, while clerk is marking those exhibits, could you tell us the age, height, and weight of Alyssa Alhadeff?
I can. 14 years old, 111 pounds, 62 inches.
Okay, and showing you State's Exhibit 199, is that Alyssa Alhadeff?
Yes.
Okay, Doctor, let's show you State's Exhibit 365. And there's two wounds marked A and B. Could you describe that for us?
I can. These are two what we call graze wounds to the top of the head, labeled A and B.
Okay, and what type of damage would A and B do?
To the scalp.
Just how
So
deep?
only the skin on top of the head.
Okay. And how deep were those graze wounds?
Not very deep.
Okay,
The skull underneath was fine.
okay. And State's Exhibit 366.
So this is an entrance gunshot wound to the left side of the chest.
Okay, and what? Where did that go? And
So this has three corresponding defects on her back This entrance gunshot wound injures the lung, the left ventricle of the heart, the great vessels of the heart, and the left lung.
And you label this gunshot wound C, correct?
That's correct.
Would gunshot wound C be fatal in and of itself?
Yes.
Okay. And you have an exit, K, L, and M, is that correct?
Correct. That's correct.
All right, showing you States Exhibit 367. Okay, and the light, but
So these are,
let me see if I can get that light out of the way. Okay.
so K, L, and M are exit wounds. K and M are what we called shored exits. That means that that part of her body was up against a hard surface when that projectile tried to exit the body.
Could you, with the aid of the telestrator, you see the different colors on there?
Show my work.
All right. Could you explain to us what assured exit wound look, why you say that?
You can select a color and then use your hand.
Okay. Lacerated when it comes out of its target. Usually leaves just a simple laceration. When that part of the body is up against a hard object, whether it's the floor or a wall, when that projectile tries to come out of the body, it goes up against that wall and causes an abrasion. So that's what this is right here. And this kind of triangular shape right here by the wound.
Okay. And there's no shoring to L.
Correct.
Okay. And that's an exit wound from one projectile?
So since these are high velocity rounds, they often fragment when they go through the body. So I only have one entrance wound and I have 3 separate exits.
Okay.
L could very well be a little fragment of that projectile.
Okay. And showing you now States Exhibit 368.
So these are entrance gunshot wounds F and G. F is to the lower abdomen on the left side at the pelvis, and G is to the left thigh.
Okay. And let's take gunshot wound F. What damage?
Skin, soft tissue, and a lot of the vessels in the pelvis.
Okay. And G?
G injures skin, soft tissue, muscle, and bone.
Okay. And now showing you States Exhibit 369.
So this is the gunshot wound that I labeled E. This is an entrance gunshot wound through the left hand.
Okay. What is a defensive wound?
So defensive wounds are wounds that are typically on the extremities of a person, hands or legs. Usually they'll use their extremities to shield their core, to whether their head or their abdomen or their chest, to try to stop some sort of injury.
Okay. And States Exhibit 370.
So this is the gunshot wound that I labeled D. This is the exit wound that corresponds with E.
Okay. And on States Exhibit 370, is that the entrance wound just below it?
That's correct.
Okay. And States Exhibit 372.
So this is the right shoulder and the right arm. These are gunshot wounds that were labeled H, I, and J.
Okay. And could you tell us the path and any damage that H, I, and J caused?
I can. I and J are So I is the entrance, J is the exit, skin, soft tissue, and muscle. H is an exit wound to a corresponding wound on the right upper chest.
Okay. And did you label the wound on the right upper chest?
I did not.
Okay. But where would it be on the body?
It's like right here.
Okay. And H would be the exit?
That's correct.
Okay. And the cause of death of Alyssa Al-Hadef?
Is multiple gunshot wounds.
Okay. And Dr. McDougall, did you perform a third autopsy on Thursday, February the 15th, 2018?
I did.
Okay. And I want to show you now State's Exhibits 18S, 18R, 18I, 18Q, 18P, 18O, 18N, 18M, 18L, 18K, and 18J. And ask you, Dr. McDougall, if you can recognize these exhibits.
I do.
Okay. And what are they?
There are pictures taken at the autopsy of Mr. Beagle and also a photo from the scene.
Okay. And do those photographs truly and accurately depict Scott Beagle as you performed the autopsy?
They do.
And would they assist you in explaining to the court and to the jury the nature of Scott Beagle's wounds?
They would.
And would they assist you in explaining the cause of death of
Yes,
Scott
sir.
Beagle? And showing you States 284. Is that Scott Beagle?
It is.
Okay. Okay, Your Honor, at this time I'd like to offer those exhibits that the identification numbers, letters that I read into.
Approach.
You may. Thank you. Okay, is there any objection from the defense?
He's having to just renew objections pursuant to D12.
Okay, over the defense objection, 18I will be received as 373. 18J will be received as 374. 18K, 375. 18L, as in Larry, 376. 18M, like Mary, 377. 18N, like Nancy, 378. 18O, 379. 18P, like Paul, 380. 18Q, 381. 18R, 382. And 18S, like Sam, 383.
Dr. McDougall, while the clerk is marking those exhibits, could you give us the age, height, and weight of Scott Beagle, please?
Again, he's 35 years old, 160 pounds, and 68 inches in length.
5'8"?
Correct.
All right, Dr. McDougall, I want to show you Safety Exhibit 374. And you have two letters there marking two injuries, D and E.
That's correct.
Okay.
So D and E are entrance gunshot wounds on the left lateral torso. So that's along the left side of the middle of your torso.
Okay, and gunshot wound D, could you describe that to us?
So D and E are clustered together because they hit a lot of the same objects and they're so close in proximity on the body. Together they injure the upper and lower lobes of the left lung, the pericardial sac, which is the sac that holds the heart, the major vessels that come out of the heart, which are the pulmonary arteries, the aorta, and the pulmonary trunk, the upper, middle, and lower lobes of the right lung, fractures a second rib on the right side of the chest, and there are 500 milliliters of blood in the left side of the chest, the right side of the chest, and 750 milliliters of blood in the left side of the chest.
Would D in and of itself been fatal?
Yes,
And E in and of itself been fatal?
correct. Yes.
All right, show you now space exhibit marked 375. And you have that marked F.
So this is an entrance gunshot wound to the left side of the back.
Okay, and could you describe that to us?
I can. This wound enters and injures skin, soft tissue, and muscle. The vertebrae, the thoracic vertebrae at the level of the 8th and 9th thoracic vertebrae, and the spinal cord.
Okay. And State's exhibit marked 376. Marked A.
This is gunshot wound. This is an exit wound A. So this is from DE or F. And this is where part of the projectile exited the body.
Okay, and that's the right part of the chest?
That's correct.
Okay. And State's exhibit marked 377.
So this is an entrance and exit gunshot wound. C is the entrance, B is the exit.
Okay. And showing you now. State's exhibit marked 378.
So this is a projectile fragment that I recovered from the right lung.
Okay. And State's exhibit 379.
This is a fragment of jacket that I recovered from the thoracic spine.
Okay. And State's exhibit 380.
This is a jacket fragment that I recovered from the right pleural cavity. So that's the cavity that holds your right lung.
Okay. And State's exhibit 381.
So these are projectile and jacket fragments that were recovered from the soft tissue of the right side of the chest.
Okay. And State's exhibit 382.
So our office has a Lodox x-ray machine. It takes full body x-rays of everybody that comes into our office. So this is the full body x-ray that we took of Mr. Beagle when he came in.
And what does it indicate?
That he's got high velocity injuries.
All right. How can you tell that?
From the difference, from all the snowstorm, so the projectiles fragment, and you see all the different fragments of the projectile in the x-ray.
And how do you differentiate that? How do you know it's a fragment?
Because they're smaller than other projectiles.
No. I mean, what does it indicate? I mean, what are you pointing out to us that indicates they're fragments?
Do you want me to? Where's my color here? All these right here.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. And the cause of death of Scott Beagle, doctor?
Is multiple gunshot wounds.
Okay. Your Honor, I have no further questions of Dr. McCready.
Okay, defense, any questions?
No, ma'am.
Thank you, you're excused. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we're going to take a 15-minute recess. Please leave your notepads behind. Please do not discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else.
Your Honor, can we go sidebar for a second before the jury leaves?
Gentlemen, we have a slight change of plan. Sometimes witnesses go faster than expected, sometimes they go slower than expected. We do our best to try to anticipate how long witnesses will take so that we can break at noon for lunch and so on and so forth. Today, it just so happens that the witness testimony went faster than expected, so we do not have, the state's witness presentation is not scheduled to continue until 1 o'clock. So we are going to break. It's about 10:45 now. We're going to ask you to please be back at 12:45. So you have a 2-hour break, right? 12:45. Please be back in the usual place. Please do not discuss the case or begin deliberating while you're on the recess. Please remember that if anyone approaches you or tries to make conversation with you about the case, tell the person to stop and report the matter immediately. Please leave your notepads behind. And other than that, I will see you all in a few hours.
Right.
Judge, Exhibit 18I was introduced as 373, but it was never published to the jury.
Okay.
The state would like to withdraw 373.
Is there any objection?
So there's no objection to the withdrawal, but our position would include the other photographs from last week, that there be an instruction to the jury that some items have been moved into evidence and the state is withdrawing them from evidence, just like we would do if we're striking testimony of a witness or striking other things. So when the jury comes back, if you could just advise them that the state is in fact doing that and that they shouldn't infer anything from it. That's the request from the defense.
We'd object to that. I don't see, if the jury didn't see it, why would we have to announce that we're withdrawing?
If something is moved into evidence, it means it goes back to the jury room, whether or not it's published in open court, and now they're taking a piece of evidence that has been admitted and they're withdrawing it, which means that there's a piece of evidence that will no longer be subject to the review of the jury. So that's the request of the defense.
Well,
I'm sorry, Mr.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And that would just include those other items from last
There's
week?
only one.
Okay, I don't remember.
So there's 2 photos total. Let me think about this, because the issue that I have is without highlighting, they hadn't seen it, so without describing it, I don't know how I would reference it, other than saying,
This is a photograph that the defense objected to. If they're withdrawing their objection, then fine, we'll just leave it in.
We're not withdrawing our objection to this photograph and whatever the photograph was from last week. We brought that objection to the attention of the state, and they were in disagreement with us. They moved it into evidence, and now it appears that they agree that that picture is prejudicial, and that's why they're withdrawing it. So there is a photograph, several photographs that have been admitted into evidence over the objection of the defense. If the state is going to withdraw or strike that evidence, I think that there should be an instruction to the jury that 2 photographs, one admitted in through the testimony of the medical examiner, and I can't remember the other one, but I can figure it out at lunch. The state of Florida has withdrawn that evidence, and that they shouldn't, it's no longer for their consideration, and that they should make no inferences from that, similar to when we strike testimony, Judge.
Well, they've never heard it like testimony they would have heard. They haven't seen this photograph. And I do not, and no one in this team feels that it is prejudicial. The reason we did it, we thought it was duplicitous, and that's why we didn't do it. And we have been doing that continually. Because, for instance, on one of the autopsy photographs, there were 84 photographs during the autopsy, and we only introduced 15. So we're just trying to be very careful and not being duplicitous or putting anything in that would, would be considered, more gruesome than it should be. So that's all we're doing. If the defense is going to withdraw their objection to those photos, we're fine with it. That's by no means am I or anyone else saying they're prejudicial. Since the jury didn't see it and we thought they were duplicitous, we thought we would just do it, but that's why we're doing it, not because we think it's prejudicial.
We're not withdrawing our objection, but I just rest on my other arguments, Your Honor. I have nothing further.
We'll put those two exhibits aside and I'm gonna think about it over lunch. And if you all can please be back at 12:45, I would appreciate it. Thank you. What time is it? 12:45? Let's go beforehand. Our present in the jury room. Are we ready? Both sides ready to begin the afternoon session?
State's ready, Your Honor.
Okay, defense?
Mr. Cooper just went to the restroom.
Okay, by the time we line them up, I'm sure they'll be back. If not, we'll just hold them for a second.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
answering.
Okay, the jurors are present. Everyone may be seated. State when you're ready. You may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Rebecca Santiago.
Good afternoon. Remain standing, please. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. You can go ahead and be seated. If you would please speak into the microphone, state your full name, and spell your last name for the record.
Rebecca Santiago, Santiago.
Good afternoon, Ms. Santiago. How are you?
Good afternoon.
Good. So, how are you employed?
I work at the Broward Sheriff's Office Crime Lab in the DNA unit
Okay. And how long have you been with the Sheriff's Office?
since July 2015.
And always with the DNA lab?
Yes.
Okay. What are your duties and what are your responsibilities at the lab?
I analyze items of evidence for the possible presence of biological material, perform DNA analysis, generate statistics, and write reports.
And how about prior to being employed by the Broward Sheriff's Office, how were you employed?
From December 2013 to January 2015, I was employed at Chromosomal Labs Bodie Technology in Phoenix, Arizona, performing forensic and relationship DNA testing. And from February 2015 to July 2015, I was a technologist with LabCorp.
Okay. And so approximately how many samples of DNA have you examined and analyzed?
At least several thousand.
Okay. So could you tell us something about your education?
I have a Bachelor's of Science in Biological Sciences from Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and a Master's of Forensic Sciences with a concentration in Forensic Molecular Biology from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C.
Okay. And did your studies include the analysis of DNA?
Yes.
Okay. How about some professional societies and organizations? Do you belong to any?
Yes. I belong to the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, and I'm certified by the American Board of Criminalistics in the molecular biology tract.
Okay. What purpose does those societies and organizations play as far as, what you do with DNA analysis?
They provide platforms for members to meet and exchange information.
Okay. And how long have you been involved with those organizations?
The American Academy of Forensic Science, I've been with them since 2015, and the American Board of Criminalistics since 2016.
Have you previously testified to testing and analysis of DNA?
Yes.
Approximately how many times?
Approximately 15.
And what courts?
Broward County.
Okay. And the Broward County Lab, is that accredited?
Yes.
And how is it accredited and by whom?
It's accredited by ANAB, that's the ANSI National Accreditation Board, and ANSI is the American National Standards Institute.
Okay. So you've testified as an expert in DNA analysis, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us what DNA is.
DNA is the genetic material. It's passed to us from our parents, and it gives our bodies instructions on how to function.
Okay. And how is it passed on by our parents? I mean, one parent give you something, another parent give you something else?
You get approximately half of your DNA from your mother and half from your father.
Okay. And when you're doing DNA analysis, how do you do that? What do you do? What's your process?
Well, from the beginning, we need to extract the DNA. We need to isolate it from the cellular materials and all the proteins in the cell. Then I need to quantify it to know how much DNA is in each sample. So because the next step, the amplification reaction, it works best with a specific target amount of DNA. So next, I amplify the DNA with a process called PCR, or the polymerase chain reaction. It amplifies target regions of the DNA. And during PCR, a fluorescent tag is added to that copy. Then those copies are put through an instrument during capillary electrophoresis. That instrument detects those molecules based on size, and it reads the tag, and then it generates a profile. And I get profiles from the evidentiary samples, and then I can compare them to reference samples from known individuals.
Okay. So why do you, the extraction process, what does that mean? So you get a swab, say, from a handle of a screwdriver, okay?
Okay,
And somebody swabs it, right? And they're swabbing it for what, DNA, right?
potentially, yes.
Okay, so somebody touches, let's use the screwdriver as an example. Somebody touches a screwdriver, they may or may not leave DNA, correct?
Possibly, yes.
Okay, so somebody swabs it, right? So it's, crime scene investigator swabs the screwdriver handle, say, right?
Okay,
Gives the swab to you, right?
yes.
So the first thing you do, you determine what? If there's any DNA.
First, I would take a cutting of the swab, and then I would go through the extraction procedure that I just mentioned.
Okay, so that's it. What's the extraction procedure mean?
That it breaks open the cells, it isolates the DNA, and it separates it and cleans it up, so then I end up with a little tube of clean DNA.
Okay, and it's a small amount usually, right?
Yes,
And that's why what you do, you amplify it, right?
correct.
And so that's, the next step would be amplification, and you amplify it because,
First, I would quantify it to determine how much is there, and then I would amplify it because there is such a small amount. And then, as I mentioned, we would add a tag to it so that we can detect it and visualize it.
okay, and then what happens after that?
Then I develop the profiles, and then I compare the profiles from reference samples to the evidentiary samples.
Okay, so how do you get, describe for us, how do you get a profile? What are you looking at when you get a profile?
It's kind of like a chart. There's different colored peaks on the chart. Those tags that get added during PCR, they each have a specific color to them. And based on the amount of DNA in the sample would correspond to the peak heights in the chart.
Okay, and how many, you're looking for how many peak heights? If your mother gives you one, your father, right?
Correct. So from a single source profile, at each location, you would have 1 or 2 peaks. 1 if you got the same allele from each parent, or 2 if you got different alleles from each parent.
And how is the peak height determined? How much DNA you have?
Correct.
Okay, so you can have a high peak or a low peak?
Yes, it would be proportional to the amount of DNA in the sample.
Okay, and there's locations, correct?
Yes.
Describe how that works.
There are locations on the DNA.
Well, how many locations are you looking at? For instance, if you have one location, you have 2 peak heights, right? So say your father gives you a 17, your mother gives you a 19, right? So you have a 17 and 19 at that location if it's a single source, correct?
Yes.
Okay, then you go to the next location, right?
Okay.
And how many locations are there that you're looking at?
Approximately 24.
Okay, so you go along the 24 locations looking for peak heights, right?
Yes.
If it's a single source, So let's just say you're trying to determine a paternity, right? So, got me so far?
Yes.
So you take a DNA sample, let's say you swab the potential father's cheek, right?
Okay.
And then you have 24 locations you're looking at, right?
Yes.
So those 24 locations, if it's a single source, you'll have 48 peaks, right?
If they're all heterozygote, if they all have 2 peaks at each location.
Okay. What happens if it's not a heterozygote?
Then it would be called a homozygote, and there would be 1 peak because you get the same allele from your mother and the same one from your father.
So if your mom's a 14 and your dad's a 14, you have a homozygote, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And so you've done that process how many times?
Thousands.
Okay. So now once you get a profile, you're trying for 24 locations along, the spectrum, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you have it all spread out, comes out of the computer, correct?
Yes.
And then what do you do?
Then I interpret those results, and then
Yes.
I make the comparisons to the reference standards that I have, and then I perform statistics.
Okay. So what is a reference sample?
It would be a buccal swab or a swab of the inside of someone's cheek, and then I just process that sample the same way that I process the evidentiary samples, and I get a DNA profile. And then I can use that profile to compare to the evidentiary samples.
Okay. So with your evidentiary profile, that's like from the handle of the screwdriver, right?
Right.
And let's say you have, alleles for all 24 locations, right?
Yes.
So you have that, it comes out. How do you describe that?
It's called an electropherogram.
Electropherogram, right? So you have an electropherogram for the evidentiary piece, right?
Yes.
Let's just say it's for the handle of the screwdriver, correct?
Yes.
And then you do an electropherogram, right, for the reference from the person that, to compare it, correct? And, if you get 24 and you compare the two, correct?
Yes.
And how many times have you done that?
Hundreds or maybe thousands.
Okay. So once you perform, is it right to call it the molecular function? The analysis of the DNA?
Statistical analysis?
No, that's what I was going to get to. After you've described the process that you've done, right? And you've done that many times, and has that process been validated?
Yes.
Okay. So once you have done that, there's a second part, right? It's the statistical analysis?
Correct.
So tell us about that and what your training is.
So I have training, I've taken college courses in statistics and population genetics. I've also been trained on the use of statistical analysis in forensic DNA, and I've attended several STR mix workshops and trainings.
Okay. So now you have, you're going to do what's the statistical analysis that you do?
The first that I've done was RMP, or the random match probability.
Okay, and how does that work?
It uses those allele frequencies in formulas, and it determines how rare a profile is.
What's an allele frequency?
The numbers that you were mentioning, 14, 17, each of those are alleles. It corresponds to the repeat units in the section of DNA that I'm looking at. And the frequency is how often it's observed in a population.
Okay, and where do you get how many times it's observed in the population?
So there's databases that contain those allele frequencies. They have sampled various populations and created databases to use for the statistical calculations.
Okay, and are those databases validated and peer-reviewed?
Yes.
Okay, so they're used by labs throughout the country, the different databases?
Yes.
Do you know how the databases are established? What methodology they use to get the samples?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Okay, so how do they get the databases?
Samples from various individuals in different populations are collected. And
Okay, so describe for us then, once you have an accredited, validated database, what statistical analysis do you perform?
the random match probability
Okay.
or a likelihood ratio.
Okay, let's talk about random match. How does that work?
Those allele frequencies that we were discussing are used in formulas, and then they're multiplied together to determine how rare a profile is.
So can you describe that to us a little bit better? I mean, you have what's you're talking about the product rule?
Correct.
Would you describe the product rule to us?
So the product rule states that when the probability of two independent events occurring together is the product of their individual probabilities. So at each location, the probability of receiving that from your parents is multiplied by the probability of another location, and then so you can do that throughout the entire profile to determine how rare a profile is.
And how many times have you done that?
Hundreds at least.
Okay. Ever done one by hand?
Maybe once during training.
So you can do the product rule by
Yes.
hand, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So with reference to this case, when did you first get involved in it?
May I refer to my notes?
Pardon?
May I refer to my notes?
Oh, of course, sure.
I began the lab work on March 7th, 2018.
Okay. So I'm going to show you now, Ms. Santiago, State's Exhibit marked 14L, which has previously been identified by another witness as a swab from GEC 1A, which is State's Exhibit 270, the M&P 15. So you recognize that exhibit?
Yes.
Okay, how do you recognize it?
It has the BSO lab number, the item number, and my initials and date.
Okay. So what did you do with that exhibit?
Inside there's a swab box that contains 2 swabs. So then I took half of each swab head and I put it into a tube, and then I ran it through the DNA extraction procedure and the rest of the procedures that I mentioned.
Okay. And then what?
And then I compared it to the reference sample I had in the case.
Okay. So let me show you now State's Exhibit marked 14X and ask you if you can identify this with Santiago.
Yes, it has the lab number, the item number, and my initials and date.
Okay. And what is that?
It's the buccal swab from Nikolas Cruz.
Okay. And what is a buccal swab?
A swab of the inside of the cheek.
Okay. And who took that buccal swab from Nikolas Cruz?
The officer's name on the package is listed as Detective Crespo.
Okay. All right. And once you got that, what did you do with it?
I took cuttings from each swab and ran it through the DNA analysis procedure.
Okay. And what was your determination?
For item 241?
Yes. When you say 241, that's your lab number, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
The DNA results are consistent with Nikolas Cruz. The chances of randomly selecting an unrelated individual consistent with the evidentiary sample are rarer than 1 in 400 billion.
So what does that mean?
That the chances of randomly selecting a person that would be consistent with that profile are rarer than 1 in 400 billion.
Okay. And did you have an opportunity to get an exact number?
Yes.
What was that?
Uh, 1 in 3.42 times 10 to the 25, or 34.2 septillion.
Okay. And I'm going to show you now State's Exhibit marked 14O, which is a swab from an ear protection piece that has been previously identified in court, and ask you, Ms. Santiago, if you can identify that.
Yes, again, it has the BSO lab number, the item number, and my initials and date.
Okay. And could you tell us the result of that?
The DNA results from item 251 are consistent with Nikolas Cruz. The chances of randomly selecting an unrelated individual consistent with the evidentiary sample are approximately 1 in 410,000.
Okay. So in order to save some time, I'm going to, well, let me do it this way. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit marked 14S. Swab of a magazine found in a vest.
Yes, again, it has the lab number, item number, my initials and date.
Okay, and the results?
The DNA results from item 259 are consistent with Nikolas Cruz. The chances of randomly selecting an unrelated individual consistent with the evidentiary sample are rarer than 1 in 400 billion.
Okay. And I'll show you State's Exhibit marked 14T. Another swab from a magazine found in the evidentiary vest that's been introduced in evidence.
Yes, again, this has the lab number, item number, my initials and date.
Okay, and the results of your analysis?
The DNA results from item 260 are consistent with Nikolas Cruz. The chances of randomly selecting an unrelated individual consistent with the evidentiary sample are rarer than 1 in 400 billion.
Okay. And I'm going to show you State's Exhibit
Judge, the
14R.
defense will stipulate that Mr. Cruz's DNA can be found on every item used to commit this crime, if that saves time.
Let me speak to the lawyers for a moment, please.
All right, Your Honor, the other items that Ms. Santiago would testify that the defendant's DNA is another magazine from the evidence vest that's been introduced. A magazine found.
I'm sorry, which item in evidence is that?
The evidence is 14U. And then State's Exhibit 14W, which is a swab from a magazine from Q39B from the third floor hallway found by Detective Crespo. State's Exhibit 14V, which is a swab from a magazine found in the Teacher's Lounge 1240.
V like Victor or B like?
V like Victor,
Okay.
yes, I'm sorry. Swab from another magazine that was found in the vest left on the third floor stairwell. 14R is the exhibit number. Then a swab, Your Honor, it's from 14M, which is from the magazine that was found in State's Exhibit 270, the Smith & Wesson M&P 15. It's been introduced in evidence. Swab from the vest that I just mentioned. It's been introduced in evidence. It was left on the third floor stairwell, 14P. And another swab from the magazine that was found in the said vest left on the third floor landing, which is 14Q. And then swab from the first floor, a hallway found by Detective Christian, and that's State's Exhibit 10F. Swab from another magazine found on the first floor by Detective Christian and identified by him as 10G. Another swab from the third magazine found by Detective Christian on the first floor of the 1200 building, 10H. Swab from the knife handle found in the backpack found by Detective Christian on the first floor of the first floor hallway of the 1200 building, and it's 10I. Then State's Exhibit 10K, which is a swab from the black ski mask that was found next to the backpack on the first floor, found by Detective Christian and testified by him. And as the last one, Your Honor, is 10J, which is a swab from the gray backpack introduced in evidence found by Detective Christian on the first floor hallway. And I am going to introduce these exhibits along with the exhibits that Ms. Santiago testified.
Okay, so members of the jury, the lawyers are stipulating, which is a fancy way of saying agreeing, that the fact that these items were swabbed and tested for DNA, that the DNA is a match to that of Nikolas Cruz. That means that a stipulation means that that fact does not need to be proven. You should consider that fact proven by means of the stipulation.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And Mr. Sachs, the only items I didn't hear you mention were 14N like Nancy and 14L like Larry. I just want to make sure I did not miss those.
14Q, 14M, 14V, 14W, 14U, 14P, 14R, 14G, 14H, 10F, 10I, 10J, 10K, and the items that Ms. Santiago already testified about, which was 14T, 14L, 14S, and 14O.
And I assume there's no objection based on the stipulation?
No, ma'am.
We're just kind of organize this. floating around up here?
No.
You mentioned a 14H, which I think may have been identified previously as 14N as in Nancy, but we don't have it up here. No 14, but is there supposed to be a 14H or 14N?
10H.
We have 10H.
14M.
We have that. The clerk and I both heard 14H. I just want to make sure we have everything.
14H is a photo.
Okay.
Your Honor, I have no further questions of Ms.
Okay,
Santiago.
I'm going to go ahead and, just give me 1 second, please.
Sure.
All right, 14L will be received as 384. 14M, like Mary, 385. 14O, 386. 14P, like Paul, 387. 14Q, 388. 14R, 389. 14S, like Sam, 390. 14T, like Tom, 391. 14U, 392. 14V, like Victor, 393. 14W, 394. 14X, like X-ray, 395. 10F as in Frank, 396. 10G, 397. 10H, 398. 10I, 399. 10J, 400. And 10K, 401. Spence, do you have any questions of this witness?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. You're excused. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Marlon Osborne.
Remain standing to be sworn in. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. You can put your hand down and be seated. Well, please speak into the microphone, state your full name, and spell your last name for the record.
Marlon Osborne, Osborne.
Good afternoon, doctor. What is your occupation?
Good afternoon. My occupation is I'm an associate medical examiner at the Palm Beach County Medical Examiner's Office.
Okay, could you briefly tell us about your educational background?
I graduated from Rutgers College with a BA in biology. I then attended Rutgers New Jersey Medical School and got an MD degree. After that, I attended Hahnemann, H-A-H-N-E-M-A-N-N, University Hospital, Drexel College of Medicine pathology program. After which I did a one-year fellowship at the Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's Office in forensic pathology. And since following that fellowship, I worked for 5 years at the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office. Following those 5 years, I worked at the Broward County Medical Examiner's Office, and I've been at the Palm Beach County Medical Examiner's Office for 3 years.
Okay. Are you licensed to practice medicine?
Yes, I am.
Where?
In Florida.
Okay. A member of any, have any board certifications?
Yes, in anatomic pathology and forensic pathology.
Okay. Have you, how many autopsies have you performed?
Well over 2,500.
Okay. And then of those 2,500 autopsies, have you been able to determine the cause of death?
Yes.
And of those 2,500 approximately autopsies, how many were as a result of gunshot wounds, approximately?
Somewhere over 200, I would say.
Okay. And have you ever testified in a court of record as a forensic pathologist?
Yes, I have.
Approximately how many times?
Well over 120 times at this point.
Okay. And in what courts?
Philadelphia, Miami, Broward, Palm Beach counties.
Okay. Dr. Osborne, did there come an occasion on Thursday, February the 15th, 2018, you performed several autopsies?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I'd like to show you now State's Exhibits 22D, 22C, 22B, 22A, 21Z, 21Y, 21X, 21W, and 21V like in Victor, and ask you, Dr. Osborne, would you please take a look at these exhibits and see if you can identify them, please, sir.
Yes, I can.
And did you perform that autopsy on that young lady?
Yes, I did.
And that is Helena Ramsey?
Yes, it is.
Would these photographs help you to explain the nature of the injuries to the court and to the jury?
Yes.
And would these exhibits, these photographs, aid you in explaining to the court and to the jury the manner and cause of death of Helena Ramsey?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to offer these exhibits. I think Mr. Support already seen them, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, does the defense have any objection to the admission of these photographs?
Just going to incorporate all grounds and arguments in the MIL 12. Thank you.
Okay, over the defense objection, 21B, like Victor, will be received as 402. 21W will be received as 403. 21X, like X-ray, will be received as 404. 21Y will be received as 405. 21Z, like zebra, will be received as 406. 22A, like alpha, will be received as 407. 22B, like bravo, will be received as 408. 22C, like Charlie, will be received as 409. 22D, like delta, will be received as 410.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Dr. Osborne, as the clerk is marking those exhibits, could you tell us the age, weight, and height of Helena Ramsey?
If I may refer to my...
Please.
Miss Ramsey was 17 years old, and she had a height that was 66 inches and 136 pounds.
Okay. I'm showing you State's Exhibit 207 that's already been introduced in evidence. Recognize her?
Yes.
That's Helena Ramsey?
Yes.
Dr. Osborne, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit marked 402. And that's labeled H. Could you explain that for us, that wound?
Yes, this wound is on the back of the right side of her head. It goes through the scalp, enters the fractures these bones of the skull, enters the calvarium, which is where the brain is housed. It causes hemorrhages along and around the brain, lacerations and contusions to the brain, and exits the left side of the forehead.
Okay, I'm showing you State's Exhibit marked 403. Is that the exit wound you're talking about?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And would that wound be lethal?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Showing you State's Exhibit marked 404. 405, I'm sorry. Could you explain what that shows?
This is showing Miss Ramsey's left side, the left side of her face. You can see the previous wound described as A on the left side of the forehead. Wound D is on the lateral aspect of the left shoulder. There's a wound B on the left side of the chest, and a wound C on the right side of the chest.
Okay. Could you tell us about wound B?
B as in boy?
Yes, B, I'm sorry.
Wound B is an irregular wound on the right side of the chest that goes through the skin and pectoralis muscles, and fragments of a projectile were recovered from within the muscles, the pectoralis muscles.
Okay. And how about wound D?
Wound D is an entrance wound on the lateral aspect of the left shoulder It goes through the muscles of the left arm and exits on a wound that will be shown later as E on the inside of the left upper arm.
Okay, and how about wound C?
Wound C is an irregular ballistic defect that has a very short wound tract, and no projectiles were recovered from that wound. It only goes into the superficial layers of the pectoralis muscle, just under the skin.
All right, and I'm showing you now State's Exhibit 406.
406 shows the exit wound, E, that corresponds to D, the entrance wound previously described on her left shoulder.
Okay. And what is above the E at her armpit? Do you see that?
Yes, this is an associated abrasion, likely associated when the bullet exited E. It hit the skin and caused an abrasion.
Okay.
That's what we're seeing on the inside of the armpit.
Okay. And State's Exhibit State's Exhibit 407. Wound G.
Wound G is on the lateral aspect of the right leg. It's an entrance wound. And the exit is on the medial aspect of the right thigh.
Okay. And showing you State's Exhibit 458.
And that is wound F. The exit wound for G.
Okay. And showing you 409. Is that a close-up of that wound?
Yes, it is.
And why is that wound so much bigger than the entrance wound?
When you have gunfire from a rifle, there's a larger amount of energy that's produced because of the velocity of the speed of the bullet, and so it creates a larger temporary cavity, and the exit wounds are usually larger in size than the entry wounds when shot from a distance.
Okay. And showing you State's Exhibit looks like 410.
Yes, those are the fragments collected from the wound labeled B on the left side of the chest.
Okay. And were you able to determine the cause of death of Helena Ramsey?
Yes, gunshot wound of head.
Gunshot wound to the head.
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Osborne. I'm going to show you now, Doctor, for identification 21S, 21R, 21Q, 21O, 21N, 21P, 21M, 21L, 21K, 21J, 21I. And ask you, Doctor, if you would examine these exhibits and tell me if you recognize them.
Yes.
Okay. And do they truly and accurately depict the autopsy you performed on Gina Montaldo?
Yes, they do.
Thursday, February the 15th, 2018?
Yes.
And would these exhibits aid you in explaining to the court and to the jury the nature of Gina Montaldo's wounds?
Yes.
And would these photographs, these exhibits, aid you in explaining to the court and to the jury the manner and cause of death of Gina Montaldo?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Your Honor, at this time, the state would offer the previous exhibits read into the record.
Defense to the objection.
Rejected on all grounds, including E and IL-12. Thank you.
Okay, so noted, thank you. Over the defense objection, the exhibits will be received as follows. 21I will be received as 411, 21J 412, 21K 413, 21L 414, 21M as in Mary 415, 21N like Nancy 416, 21O 417 417, 21P as in Paul 418, 21Q 419, 21R 420, and 21S like Sam 421.
Dr. Osborne, while the clerk is marking those exhibits, could you give us the age and the height and weight of Gina Montaldo?
If I may refer.
Sure, please.
Miss Montalto was 14 years old. She was 65 inches tall and weighed 108 pounds.
Okay. I'm showing you State's Exhibit 101. Is that Gina Montaldo?
Yes, it is.
Dr. Osborne, I'm going to show you the State's Exhibit now, 411. And you have an A there next to what appears to be a wound. Could you explain that to us, please, sir?
We are looking at the anterior aspect of the left shoulder of Ms. Montalto. And here you can see
You can use one of the colors, and if you want to do the telestrator, that's it.
the entrance gunshot wound of the left shoulder. It goes through the area of the left shoulder. It fractures the left scapula and exits on wound F.
Okay. And what did it go through?
It went through the deltoid muscle and the scapula, which is the wing-shaped bone on the back.
Okay. And here states Exhibit 412. And you said F was the exit.
Yes, that's the corresponding exit.
Okay. And that's the exit for wound A?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now I'm going to show you State's Exhibit marked 413. And you have a B there.
Yes, this is on the anterior aspect of the chest towards the left side. It's a large wound with seared edges from the 6 o'clock to the 12 o'clock position. This wound goes through the left fifth intercostal space, fractures the left fifth rib anteriorly. It goes into the pericardium and obliterates the apex and the anterior left wall of the left ventricle. It exits the posterior wall of the left ventricle and then goes through the left fifth intercostal space posteriorly to end up in the back muscles.
Okay. And when you, pericardium, that's the heart?
That's the sac that covers the heart.
Okay. And is this wound B fatal in itself?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now you talked about the seared edges. What do you mean?
This purple-black discoloration from the 6 o'clock position along to the 12 o'clock position, it's a characteristic of the wounds, and we use those to give us an idea of how far the end of the gun was from the decedent when it was fired. When we have the end of the gun intimately touching the skin or almost touching the skin, you can have transfer of gases and the heat from the end of the gun, causing abrasions around the actual wound itself. When a gun is fired, rifle or handgun, not only the bullet leaves the end of the gun, you have the gases that are expressed from the combustion causing the bullet to be propelled through the barrel of the gun. Also, you have particles of burnt gunpowder that exit, as well as unburnt particles from inside the barrel of the gun and gunpowder. So if the burnt particles hit the skin, they can leave behind a black or grayish stain, which we call soot. Burning particles, if they hit the skin, can cause small abrasions around the wound itself, and that's called stipple. So the further you are away from the end of the gun, the more likely you are to see some of these characteristics. So if the gun is touching the skin, it can maybe only leave just a searing and an abrasion. You go out a few inches to a couple of feet, you may see soot and or stipple. Beyond a certain point, depending upon the gun, the type of ammo, the gun, you'll see different patterns, but at some point you won't see anything at all. So then we call those wounds we can't tell how far the end of the gun was from the decedent.
So on this wound B, in your opinion, this is a contact wound?
This would be contact or close contact through clothing. Okay.
Even though somebody would be wearing clothes, you could still get the contact wound like that, right?
You can get the heat transfer that would cause the abrasion and searing if it's intimately close.
Okay. And that's what this wound B shows, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now showing you State's Exhibit marked 414. You have a C there.
C is a wound on the left side of the upper abdomen. It too has a seared abrasion collar, nearly circumferentially, which is all around the wound itself. This wound goes through the abdominal wall. It perforates the left lobe of the liver. It perforates the stomach. It goes through her spleen and perforates her left kidney, and goes through the back muscles to be just beneath the area designated as G on the left side of the back, where a bullet is recovered.
Okay. And I'm going to show you now State's Exhibit 415. Could you explain? It's a close-up of wound C. The searing you're talking about?
This and faint muzzle abrasion is the area here, just outside the edges of the wound.
And what's that indicate to you?
That the end of the gun, the muzzle, was in contact through clothing to the skin.
Okay. Another contact wound.
Contact through clothing, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll show you now State's Exhibit marked 417.
That is a wound labeled D on the back of the right hand here. And that goes through, fractures the bones in the middle of the hand, and exits on the palm of the right hand. Wound E.
All right. Do you know what's a defensive wound?
Wounds that are defensive are considered wounds on parts of the body that someone would use to defend themselves from any kind of incoming attack. So they could be wounds on parts of the extremities, from the hands to the forearms to even the upper arm, depending upon how that limb could be placed in front of other parts of the body, mostly the torso, where the vital organs are, to protect itself from incoming assault.
So if somebody put their hand up like this?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 417.
That's the exit wound E for the entrance wound D that was previously described.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 418, and I think you mentioned exit wound G before?
Well, G is a slight contusion and dippling of the skin, which a bullet was recovered from, and that is the corresponding bullet for the entrance wound C on the abdomen.
Okay, and F?
F, again, is the exit wound for the entrance wound on the anterior aspect of the left shoulder, A.
Okay. Based on your examination, Dr. Osborne, are you able to tell the order of the shots that hit Gina Montalvo?
No, I can't specifically say the specific order in which they occurred.
Okay. Was how about hemorrhaging in the track of the wound?
All wound tracks had some degree of hemorrhage.
So there's no way you can tell, for instance, that A and D came before B and C?
The natures of B and C, if wound D is considered a defensive wound, that could have come before the more contact wounds on the body. There isn't any distinct irregularity to the entrance wound D, and afterwards exiting on E, there might be some distortion of the bullet. However, The wound A looks like a typical entrance wound without any irregularity, and wounds C and B were close through clothing, so I don't think the hand could have gotten in between those wounds. So D likely came before the other 3 wounds, but I can't tell you the order in which the other 3 occurred.
Okay. And how about the cause of death of Gina Montalvo?
Multiple gunshot wounds.
Okay. I'm showing you State's Exhibit Mark 419.
Those are the fragments collected for from the back muscles associated with gunshot wound B to the chest.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 420.
That was a deformed bullet fragment that was collected from her hair.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 421.
That is the separate jacket and core of the bullet that went through the abdomen.
Okay. All right, Dr. Osborne, thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Thanks for any questions.
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, sir. You're excused.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I have some more questions.
Okay.
I don't know. Why for now. Dr. Osborne, I'd like to now show you State's Exhibit 22I, 22H, 22G, and 22F. And ask you, Dr. Osborne, if you're good enough to again look at these exhibits. See if you recognize.
Yes.
Okay. What are they?
They're the photographs from the autopsy of Miss Jamie Gutenberg.
Did you perform the autopsy on Jamie Gutenberg?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And would those photographs assist you in explaining to the court and to the jury the nature of Jamie Gutenberg's wounds?
Yes, they would.
And would those photographs aid you in explaining to the court and to the jury the manner and cause of death of Jamie Gutenberg?
Yes.
Okay, Your Honor, just tell me what those exhibits read into the record, please, Your Honor.
Is there any objection?
This may object on all grounds outlined in D and MIL 12.
Okay, over the defense objection, State's Exhibit 22F, like Frank, will be received as 422. 22G will be received as 423. 22H will be received as 424. And 22I will be received as 425.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Dr. Osborne, while the clerk is marking those exhibits. Could you tell us the age, height, and weight of Jamie Guttenberg, please?
She was 14 years old, weighed 104 pounds, and was 64 inches tall.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 114. Do you recognize her?
Yes, that is Miss Guttenberg.
Okay, Doctor, I'm going to show you now State's Exhibit 422. And you have that wound labeled A.
Yes, this is the entrance wound on the left side of the back of the left shoulder.
And could you tell us about the wound track?
This wound tract goes through the back muscles, fractures the left first and second ribs posteriorly, enters the left chest cavity, perforates the upper lobe of the left lung, perforates the body of the 7th cervical vertebrae, and exits the base of the right side of the neck at wound B.
Okay. And showing you State's Exhibit 423.
So this is the base of the right side of the neck. This is wound B here with associated abrasions along the clavicular area.
And B is the exit wound of A, correct?
Correct.
And what
The
damage did...
photo is not showing.
Pardon?
The photo is not showing. Oh, no, it is. It went off for a second.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you did that on purpose.
No, I didn't do anything.
Okay.
No.
Was it off?
It went off for a second, yes.
Okay. Do it again, please, Doctor. B is the exit wound for A?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and could you describe, the damage that wound, that bullet caused?
It fractured the left first and second ribs, disrupting the normal spatial atmosphere of the left chest cavity, making it difficult to breathe. It also injured the upper lobe of the left lung, causing compromise of the ability to do gas exchange and use that portion of the lung. Additionally, there was 300 milliliters of blood that was present at autopsy in the left chest cavity that likely compromised the expansion of the left lung that led to death.
Okay, and what was the cause of death of Jamie Guttenberg?
Gunshot wound of neck and torso.
Okay, and why?
As I explained, her ability to use her left lung was severely compromised by the entry of the gunshot wound and the path it took crossing through the left chest cavity, as well as the injury to the spinal cord as it fractured the 7th cervical vertebrae, severing the spinal cord at that level. That would effectively lead her to not be able to use any bodily function or have purposeful movement lower than that level. And additionally, that would also affect her respirations.
Okay. All right, thank you, Dr. Osmond. Your Honor, now I have no further questions of Dr. Osmond.
Thank you so much.
That's what we have for today.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I guess this is going to be another early day for you. We're going to recess until tomorrow. Please do not discuss the case among yourselves. Please do not discuss the case with anyone at all at home, here, in the courthouse, or on your way to your cars. If anyone tries to discuss the case with you, please tell them that you are on the jury. Please leave the person at once, and please report the matter immediately. Other than that, please leave your notepads on your chairs, and have a nice afternoon, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you for your patience. Okay, the jurors have been excused. Doctor, whenever you're ready, you're excused, and we're going to be in recess until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. We'll start back up with the state's presentation.